Surely you're the kind of person who insists on paying. After all, I've been so generous to let you work outside the home, so you must be saving up a fortune, right? Sandra, my mother-in-law, boldly took my purse in her hands. Struggling to get up with a high fever, I tried to stop her, but Sandra and my husband just went on their trip. Instead of getting my purse back, I ended up with a bucket full of cold water. With trembling hands, I tapped on my mobile phone. My husband William and I, Nancy, are newlyweds, having married just 2 months ago. I just turned 23, but I moved here to be with William, who graduated from college 2 years before me and had returned to his hometown after he proposed. In this land rich in nature, where time seems to move more slowly than before, I find the chance to fulfill my childhood dream. That dream is to work in a cafe visited by many customers, where soft music plays, and where I can have pleasant conversations with the guests who relax as they please. I searched for a job with this goal in mind, but while there were openings in restaurants, I couldn't find any in cafes. Eventually, I took a job as a clerk in a beloved local shop that has been around for a long time. Our new home is on the same property as my in-laws' house. Due to the rural nature of William's hometown, where most people own their homes, the few apartments suitable for young people are always in demand and never available. When it came to renting, the only options were old houses, so at William's suggestion, we ended up renting a small house next to my in-laws' house. This was how our married life began, but the most surprising thing was the change in William. While he was kind and reliable from our dating days through the early days of our marriage, moving next to his parents' house turned him into an unbelievable mama's boy. Or maybe he was always a mama's boy, and I just hadn't been able to see it. He managed to hide it so well that mom says and mom thinks became how most of our conversations started, with William believing his mother was always right and the best person to understand him. Sandra, who raised William, is commendable for her continued treatment of her grown son as if he were still a child. Upon seeing me, she openly shows hostility, seeing me as the woman who stole her precious son. What started as minor annoyances from Sandra escalated into harassment that can no longer be described as mere nuisances. Daniel, my father-in-law, and the only person who could have put a stop to Sandra's antics, unfortunately got transferred for work soon after we moved in, making it difficult to rely on him. My situation is far from the dreamy newlywed life I had envisioned. Sandra, who can't seem to rest without attacking me, lives in her large house but visits our small one next door daily to lecture me on what she believes a wife's duties are. I was quickly worn out by Sandra's repeated advice, starting with, "You might not understand because you're young," but telling me to do everything her way and to quit my job to take care of the home. I asked William to mediate, but showing his true colors as a mama's boy, he not only failed to remain neutral, but joined Sandra in lecturing me on how to be a wife. In an unfamiliar land without support even from my husband, who I wished could be my biggest ally, I threw myself into my work to avoid being home. Sometimes, the elderly women who visit the shop as customers would listen to my troubles, but they would just laugh it off, saying harassment by the mother-in-law towards a young wife is quite common. After hearing their own harrowing tales, I even became hesitant to share my woes with the usually sympathetic shop manager. Though I wanted to make friends of my own age, my world is confined to this shop and the in-laws' house. And in such a rural area, finding a better job isn't easy. Although I want to escape this environment, when I think of my parents who were happy about my marriage and probably looking forward to grandchildren, it makes the idea of divorce within just a few months too daunting. In this seemingly inescapable situation, I juggle household chores and work, enduring the unnecessary harassment directed at me. But it seemed my body was steadily accumulating fatigue, and one morning, I found myself unable to get up with a fever of 40 Tarzari. That day, William and Sandra were set to depart for a hot spring trip. Sandra, who had arrived early in the morning, seemed to be in a particularly good mood. Her loud laughter and the sound of her walking down the hallway echoed in my head, and I closed my eyes. But Sandra, unwilling to excuse me lying in bed, entered my room without saying a word, and ripping off the sheets, ordered me to see them off. "You're planning to stay like that while your husband and mother-in-law are leaving? Having such a lazy, sloppy woman as my son's wife? Oh, how embarrassing! The neighbors will laugh. Are you listening? I'm saying you're failing as a wife." Somehow I managed to sit up in bed, but perhaps due to the fever, my head wasn't clear, and although I could hear Sandra's voice, I couldn't respond. Seemingly irritated by my dazed state, Sandra sighed dramatically and started to leave the room. However, just before she exited into the hallway, she stopped suddenly and reached for my purse that was on a shelf. While claiming to offer me a chance to redeem myself as a wife, Sandra pulled my wallet from the purse with a malicious grin. I have a wide circle of friends, so you know the cost of souvenirs adds up. A competent wife who understands the importance of neighborhood relations would insist on paying. After all, I've been so generous to let you work outside, so you must be saving up a fortune, right? I tried desperately to stop Sandra from leaving with my purse from atop my bed. The contents of that purse were meant for this month's groceries. Aside from the rent and utility costs for our small house, William started giving Sandra a monthly allowance, and since then, the household money handed to me had significantly decreased. Another reason I couldn't easily quit my job. According to William, with Daniel on a work assignment, he didn't want Sandra to feel lonely and deprived of money for entertainment. But in reality, our own living situation was anything but comfortable. In the countryside where salaries are low, the money I earn doesn't afford us the luxury to let Sandra freely enjoy herself. Yet William failed to understand this no matter how many times I explained. And to make matters worse, despite receiving a sufficient monthly sum from Daniel, Sandra seems to be saving it instead of spending it, likely to avoid getting scolded by the prudent Daniel for splurging. I can't count how many times. I've wished for Daniel's help, but even if I did reach out, Daniel couldn't come back immediately. The thought of Sandra finding out I sought help from Daniel was terrifying, making it impossible for me to contact him. As Sandra was about to walk away with my purse, humming a song, I tried to run after her, screaming for her to give it back. But in reality, I only managed to stagger a few steps from the bed before sitting down, somehow mustering my voice to accuse her of thievery, even among family. Sandra, with a dismissive, all right, stuffed my wallet into her pocket and quickly left the room. I gathered my strength to stand and follow Sandra, but I couldn't muster the energy and could only walk slowly. Then, as I made a little progress, Sandra came back towards me with a bucket full of water. Without hesitation, she dumped the entire bucket of water on my face, laughing so hard she had to hold her stomach as I coughed. Consider that a thank you for the money. If your fever is that high, you should cool down properly. The water is from the shower room, left over from yesterday, so it's nice and cold, right? Hope your fever goes down soon, she said. Instead of scolding Sandra, William, who had been watching, simply laughed. Make sure you dry off properly, he said, and the two of them left for their trip. Coughing made my headache worse, and I felt nauseous as I crawled towards my mobile phone. Feeling at my limit, I tried to call an ambulance, but my body was shaking so badly from the cold water that I couldn't tap the number properly. As I fumbled with the numbers, my consciousness abruptly faded. When I next awoke, I was in the hospital. Rushing to the hospital room after hearing what happened from the nurse was Patricia, my boss at work and William's grandmother. She's someone I could call a benefactor, who offered to take me in at her store when I was struggling to find a place to work. Patricia, who was kind and friendly, employed me in her small-town shop, despite it not being very busy. She thought it odd for the diligent me to miss work without notice, and had apparently tried to contact me several times. However, unconscious as I was, I couldn't answer the phone, and worried, Patricia visited the in-laws' house, only to find me collapsed and soaked in the small house next door. She hurriedly called an ambulance and laughed with relief, saying her life had shortened from the scare. Though my fever was high, I was diagnosed likely with a cold, and after being asked for an explanation for why I was knocked out drenched by both Patricia and the doctor, I explained everything without excluding any details. Patricia was furious about Sandra's treatment and William's attitude, promising to make them reflect while also scolding me. Times have changed from the past. Enduring because you think you have it better is a mistake. Don't take the misery Olympics of the elderly as reference. If you're suffering, it's okay to say so. Your parents for sure care more about the daughter they raised than a grandchild yet to be born. Knowing their beloved daughter is suffering in her spouse's home, unaware, I would make any parent cry, she admonished, Encouraged by Patricia's stern yet caring words to rely more on those around me, I felt a sense of awakening, as if everything had cleared up. After discussing my future with Patricia and the doctor, and since my condition stabilized with treatment after I was prescribed my medicine, it was decided I would stay with Patricia for a while. Because Patricia lived in a different house, saying, "I don't want people to live with me and treat me like an old person when I'm still healthy." I took her offer with relief, grateful for not having to return to that house. When William and Sandra returned from their leisurely 3-night, 4-day trip, they were greeted by Patricia, myself, and a lawyer. Though we convened for a discussion without any talk of their trip, progress was not easy, as expected. When the lawyer explained that throwing water on me, causing me to lose consciousness with a high fever, could have endangered my life had Patricia not called an ambulance, they both started laughing. They dismissed the possibility, arguing that since I'm alive and my fever has subsided, there's no issue, as the outcome proves. Seeing their predictable response, I informed them that I had already consulted the police and filed a report. Sandra and William then became furious, raising their voices about how making a big deal over a little water was an exaggeration. The lawyer calmly stated that throwing water could be considered assault, and if it worsened my cold, it might be seen as battery. Adding that going out and leaving a sick person unable to stand could be seen as malicious enough reason to file a report, I told them I was willing to withdraw the report if William admitted fault and agreed to a divorce and compensation. However, Sandra and William rejected my proposal, scoffing at the idea that a lawyer and an old woman could do anything without proof, and walked out. And so, our negotiation broke down. But frankly, that didn't matter much. By the time we arranged this meeting, our main goal was nearly achieved. I continued to stay with Patricia, leading a normal life, while Sandra and William inadvertently cornered themselves. After returning from their trip, William faced avoidance at work, and Sandra from her circle of friends. Not surprisingly, Patricia had been contacting everyone she knew to find a trustworthy lawyer for me, explaining the situation not just to those who asked out of curiosity, but to everyone. Moreover, the hospital I was taken to is the largest in the area, meaning many healthcare workers and patients knew about the incident. While doctors have confidentiality obligations, Patricia, relieved at my safety, would loudly discuss how her grandson's wife was harassed and taken away by ambulance whenever she encountered acquaintances like nurses in hallways or waiting areas. After moving here, I've realized that rumors spread frighteningly fast in the countryside. This incident spread quickly, but as it passed by word of mouth, baseless information followed. Before long, the story morphed into a mother-in-law conspiring with her son to get rid of his wife for insurance money, dramatized in such an outrageous way, tormenting Sandra and William. Unable to bear being the subject of whispered conversations from a distance, the two of them came together to Patricia's house, sobbing and offering me a profound apology. In response, I agreed to withdraw the report on the condition of divorce and the payment of several million in compensation. The actions of Sandra and my husband could have led to criminal charges or civil claims for damages. However, I told the lawyer I want the quickest way to get the money and cut ties, and was advised that a settlement was the best course. After the divorce, I returned to my parents' home with the full amount of compensation from Sandra and William. According to Patricia, who I still keep in touch with, Sandra was divorced by Daniel and moved away with William somewhere. Patricia, focusing on those she had approached for lawyer recommendations, spread the word that the matter had been settled between the parties involved. But even after the resolution of the incident, people did not return to Sandra and William's side. Apparently, their haughty behavior had already made them unpopular, and new rumors began to circulate, like William and Sandra forced Nancy to withdraw the report under duress. They got rid of the inconvenient Nancy. Finding themselves increasingly isolated, the two sought help from Daniel, who was on assignment, but by then the story had spread. Daniel, highly trusted by others, had information from friends and had heard from Patricia, and refused their request to live with him at his assignment location, and presented them with a divorce. William, unable to bear the atmosphere at work, resigned, and with Sandra cut off from Daniel's income, left as if escaping. Unable to find work here, concerns that they might come to my parents' house were dismissed, since the financially struggling couple would likely spare even the travel expense. Even if they did show up, my father, fuming with readiness to give them a proper thanks, made me feel secure. While considering moving out from my parents' house, I'm planning to open a new cafe with the compensation money as capital. Although I still have much to learn, having worked at Patricia's shop and helped by many, I aim to create a cafe with close human connections, not the bustling one I initially envisioned, but a place where people can truly relax. As I wrap a thank you gift for Patricia, my heart swells with the new dream she has given me. "Hey, evildoer, Mom's got to stay in the hospital now," Richard said to me, dripping with sarcasm as I hurried into Jennifer's hospital room. Next to him, my mother-in-law Jennifer glared at me from her bed. "Someone turned off the AC in Mom's room, and now look." Richard glared at me disdainfully as he said, "Someone." My name is Lisa, a 46-year-old housewife with no children. I live with my husband Richard, who is 4 years my senior, and his 80-year-old mother, Jennifer. Over the past few years, Jennifer's health has gradually deteriorated, and she's been mostly bedridden for the last few months. I handle all household chores and Jennifer's care, while Richard leaves everything to me and does as he pleases. Jennifer and I have never gotten along since I married into the family, with her seemingly believing I've taken her son away, always treating me maliciously. I never thought I'd end up caring for her, but here I am, burdened with it. When Jennifer made unreasonable demands as usual, I thought it wasn't right to always comply and didn't respond, leading her to complain, "Lisa is bullying me. This harsh daughter-in-law thinks nothing of me." Thus, Jennifer would rant to Richard, and because he always sided with her, it would lead to endless arguments between us. Perhaps tired of the domestic strife, Richard began to seldom come home, citing work as an excuse. In this situation, with Richard unreliable and bedridden, Jennifer escalating her demands, my days are filled without a moment's peace. Reaching my limit, I presented Richard with divorce papers, but he refused to even discuss it, claiming he was too busy or not in the mood. On a particularly hot summer day, contemplating leaving the house for good, I pondered my next steps. I was about to go out for grocery shopping and to buy a replacement for a burnt-out light bulb. That day, the weather forecast had warned of a severe heat wave, so to prevent Jennifer from getting heat stroke, I left the air conditioning on and didn't turn it off. "Jennifer, I'm heading out to buy some groceries for dinner and a new light bulb since ours is out. I think I'll be back in the evening," I said, but there was no reply from Jennifer. Ignoring me was usual for her, so I double-checked everything and left a note before heading out to shop. Richard, who buys coffee and bread at the grocery store almost daily, fiercely criticizes my shopping habits. As soon as I get home, he grabs the receipt, looks at the total amount, and complains that it's too expensive. Every day, Jennifer, for her part, compares the amount on the receipt Richard gave her with flyers from various supermarkets and yells that this item is cheaper at that supermarket. However, I thought, I'm going to divorce anyway, so why bother? And just as I was shopping, I received a call from an unknown number. It turned out to be a nearby hospital. "Is this Lisa's mobile phone? Jennifer has been brought to our hospital by ambulance. Could you please come here?" was the message, mixed with surprise and confusion. I hurried to the hospital. Upon entering the room I was directed to, without even catching my breath, I found Richard and Jennifer, who was sitting up in bed talking. I had braced myself for the worst, so seeing Jennifer talking in bed was a relief. But Richard immediately became furious upon seeing me and started shouting, "Hey, you turned off the AC in this heat, didn't you? What were you thinking doing something like that? What you did was practically attempted murder," he accused me vehemently. "That's right. Lisa turned off the air conditioning. She left without saying a word, and I almost died from heat stroke. I never imagined my son's wife would try to take my life." Jennifer kept insisting that I had turned off the AC. She apparently had called an ambulance herself, claiming to suffer from heat stroke. "Wait a minute. I left the air conditioning on, and I did tell you, didn't I? I even left a note," I defended myself, as I had indeed left the AC on and had no intention of harming Jennifer. However, Richard, blinded by anger, wouldn't listen, and Jennifer denied seeing any note, insisting that I had turned off the AC. She apparently had called an ambulance herself, claiming to suffer from heat stroke. "Wait a minute. I left the air conditioning on, and I did tell you, didn't I? I even left a note," I defended myself, as I had indeed left the AC on and had no intention of harming Jennifer. However, Richard, blinded by anger, wouldn't listen, and Jennifer denied seeing any note, insisting that I had turned off the AC. It seemed impossible that Jennifer would fabricate such a complicated lie just to slander me, so Richard blindly believed her and accused me of deliberately turning off the AC, questioning my humanity. In the midst of this heated exchange, a police officer, who Richard and Jennifer had apparently called, entered the room. As soon as the officer arrived, both Richard and Jennifer intensified their accusations, demanding my immediate arrest as a criminal. The officer, calming down the agitated Jennifer, then solemnly told Richard and me, "Regarding this incident, the doctor will explain the details, but there might be a possibility that Jennifer has dementia." "Dementia, Mom?" Richard asked, taken aback. "Yes," the officer nodded, and then Jennifer's attending doctor entered the room to begin his explanation. "Actually, we didn't find any signs of heat stroke in Jennifer. However, she couldn't move her lower body, so we conducted an initial examination but found no significant abnormalities in Jennifer's body. Therefore, we will conduct more detailed tests. But based on Jennifer's behavior and the test results, it's possible she might be suffering from mild dementia. She might have believed that the working air conditioner was turned off." After the doctor finished speaking, Jennifer, with her face turning red, shouted at the doctor, "I don't have dementia! You're a fake doctor! I was nearly dead! There has to be something wrong!" Richard also sided with Jennifer, unable to accept reality, insisting that I must have intentionally caused Jennifer's heat stroke. Facing the formidable anger and intensity of Jennifer and Richard, the doctor tried explaining multiple times, but they just couldn't see eye to eye, remaining at an impasse. Even if Mom was starting to show signs of dementia, the air conditioner was indeed off. How do you explain that? Richard's words reminded me of the existence of a security camera in Jennifer's room. Just last week, we had installed a recording-capable security camera. It was initially set up because of Richard's disregard for Jennifer's complaints of sarcasm and violence, but now it felt reassuring that it could cast out. I informed the police about the security camera in Jennifer's room and requested that they check the recording. Then, Jennifer, completely changing her demeanor from before, suddenly became flustered and said, "Well, this time fortunately nothing happened to me, so I'll let it go. Sorry for having the police come out for nothing. I know you're busy, so everything is fine here now." Noticeably altering her attitude. Suspicious of Jennifer's abrupt 180-degree change in attitude, the police decided to go to my house with me to check the recording. Everyone except Jennifer agreed to review the footage, and Richard was especially unconcerned, saying he didn't mind however much they wanted to check. Jennifer was then taken to the hospital for further examination, resisting desperately as she was led away for testing by the doctor. Richard, the police officer, and I promptly returned home, removed the SD card from the security camera in Jennifer's room, inserted it into Richard's computer, and watched the video together. As the moment Jennifer called the ambulance approached, we saw her supposedly bedridden stand up without any trouble, walk to the air conditioner, and turn it off with the remote. Then she took the note I had left, tore it up meticulously, and threw it away as if pushing it into the trash can. There was no excuse for Jennifer's self-staged drama, leaving Richard bewildered and despondent. Upon returning to the hospital, we found Jennifer waiting in her room after the tests. We told her the whole truth and showed her the newly discovered video of her turning off the air conditioner, prompting Jennifer to start ranting. "Yes, I turned off the air conditioner, but it's because of this strict daughter-in-law of mine leaving me alone for hours to go out and have fun. I just wanted to teach her a lesson," she admitted, acknowledging her self-sabotage. The police took Jennifer's confession, and since it seemed there was no criminal intent, they decided to let her off with a stern warning before heading back to the station. The doctor confirmed Jennifer could move but instructed her to undergo further tests tomorrow as her mobility seemed worse compared to her last visit. If no abnormalities were found, she could be discharged as soon as the next day, he said before returning to his duties. Richard and I left Jennifer's hospital room without speaking a word to each other, overwhelmed by exhaustion, and headed home. I then slept, burdened with an indescribably frustrated feeling. Later, the hospital contacted us, stating Jennifer's condition was age-appropriate without any significant illnesses, and her discharge was arranged for the same day. I responded to the hospital's call, but I left all the discharge procedures to Richard without involving myself. Richard had evidently assumed I would go pick her up and complete the procedures. However, since I remained inactive and the hospital's reminders increased, I reluctantly went to pick her up, completed the procedures, and returned home with Jennifer. Upon our return, a discussion among the three of us ensued, with Richard unleashing his anger about Jennifer's deceit, declaring he would no longer care for her. "I can't deal with you anymore. It seems like you needing care for being bedridden was also a lie. From now on, Lisa and I will live our lives, and you can spend the rest of your days however you please." With that, he distanced himself from Jennifer, who cried, begged for forgiveness, and sought reconciliation. I intervened. "Wait a minute. I absolutely refuse to continue living like this. Let's get a divorce once and for all. Please sign these divorce papers." Saying that, I presented Richard with the divorce papers already filled out on my part. Richard, utterly clueless about what he had done to upset me, looked bewildered and asked, "Wait a minute, Lisa. This doesn't make any sense. Why do we have to get divorced over this incident? Isn't Mom the one at fault here?" I decided to carefully explain all the reasons why I wanted a divorce. "Listen, first of all, in this incident, Richard, you didn't listen to a word I said and just believed Jennifer, even going as far as to insult me as a cruel woman attempting murder. This isn't something new. You've always taken Jennifer's side. I've always felt alone. And now, without any evidence, you concluded it was my doing, went on a rampage, and even called the police, treating me like a criminal. There's no love in that. Furthermore, since returning home, you haven't apologized once. You boldly declared you won't take care of Jennifer anymore, but I've reached my limit. You were never cooperative with the caregiving. I was the one who actually took care of Jennifer, and it was incredibly hard." As I laid out my reasons, Richard glared at me, clearly displeased. "Why bring this up now? I've always said I can't handle taking care of Jennifer anymore. This isn't the first time I've shown you the divorce papers either. Living with you has been impossible from the start, and this incident has made it utterly unfeasible. Will you please just agree to the divorce?" Richard, not liking the undeniable truth and logic, stubbornly refused to consent to the divorce. I remained calm, declared that I would involve a lawyer, and quickly packed my things to leave for my parents' house. A while after leaving, Richard messaged me, easily agreeing to the divorce as I had wished. However, he then started saying that there would be no division of property in the divorce. I immediately tried to contact Richard, but he did not respond, and only the completed divorce papers were sent, cutting off all communication. To uncover the discomfort I had felt for some time, I decided to hire a detective despite the cost to investigate Richard. A few days later, I received the investigation report from the detective, and as expected, Richard had been having an affair for a long time and had started a new life at the in-laws' house with his mistress, finding it convenient that I had left. Included were photos of Richard enjoying shopping hand-in-hand with the mistress, which infuriated me to the peak. Unable to contact Richard, I stormed the in-laws' house at a time I suspected Richard and his mistress would be there. Shocked by my sudden visit, Richard and his mistress watched as I showed them the copied evidence of the affair, saying, "You seem to have been enjoying yourselves. Well, you'll be paying for the affair." With that message delivered, I left the in-laws' house again. On my way back to my parents' house, Richard bombarded me with calls and messages, but I blocked and deleted his contact this time. Later, I submitted the evidence of the affair to my lawyer and successfully won compensation from both Richard and his mistress. As for Richard and his actions afterward, a friend living near the in-laws' house informed me that having paid a substantial amount of compensation, Richard and his new wife found themselves without money, leading to a difficult life. Though they remarried quickly, their poverty seemed to cause daily arguments so loud that the neighbors could hear their shouting. Jennifer, despite not finding any illness after thorough examinations, experienced worsening physical mobility due to her age, ironically becoming truly in need of care, as if her lies had become reality. The mistress, having no experience in caregiving and tired of being forced into it by Jennifer and Richard just as I had been, packed her bags one night while Jennifer and Richard were asleep, left only the filled-out divorce papers, and disappeared. Richard, having betrayed his wife who cared for his parents by having an affair and remarrying only to be left and quickly divorced, became a topic of scorn at work as the worst kind of man, losing his place there. An episode where Jennifer appeared at Richard's company, loudly searching for him and causing a scene added to their reputation as a peculiar family, leading to laughter behind their backs. With the uncomfortable atmosphere at work, Richard started missing days and eventually stopped showing up without notice, leading to his dismissal and loss of job. Now he's doing hard physical part-time work while also taking care of Jennifer. Friends who saw him after a long time mentioned he looked much older than his age, almost unrecognizably so. As for me, thanks to the compensation from both Richard and his mistress, I'm living a financially comfortable life, seeking a fresh start. Although having never worked before, I tried my hand at felt art, something I'd always been interested in. It became popular through social media, and now I'm able to make a living as a felt art designer and teach it to students in my own classes. Freed from Jennifer's malicious harassment, the caregiving duties, and having divorced Richard, who had been a source of stress for years, I'm enjoying a liberated and joyful life. Having devoted so much to Richard and Jennifer, I've decided to live for myself from now on, indulging in my passion for felt art without being bound by any